That was great. That may be true for you, but not true for me. Live your truth. Hey, you be you. Have you heard these kind of phrases before? My question is, does truth even matter? Honestly, who cares? Why seek after truth and why sacrifice for it? Well, a number of years ago, I was speaking at a conference, giving a talk on truth. And as soon as I was done, a young man came right up to me and he asked me this question. He said, "You just gave a talk for an hour about truth. Why is truth even important?" I said, "Well, do you want the true answer or the false answer?" Friends, if you ask why is truth important, without even realizing it, what do you assume is important? This is the participatory part of the program. The Apostle Paul sure thought truth was important. He said, "With all deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of truth so as to be saved." Do you love truth, even if it costs you something? Truth matters. So for starters, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why truth is so important. Number 1, truth has consequences. Truth has consequences. My uncle's a pastor up in Massachusetts, and he told me a story about a cousin of mine who I never personally met. Because this cousin was deaf, he couldn't hear. He would wake up in the morning and go walking on the railroad tracks, same place, same time every day. He got up in the morning thinking he would be fine because it never occurred to my cousin that they would change the times that the train came. So he's walking on the train tracks, couldn't hear the warning, train couldn't stop in time, and it struck and killed my cousin largely because he had false information. Friends, truth matters. I was just in another city where some teenagers went around and thought it was funny to pull some stop signs up from an intersection. And some people went swinging through there full speed, believing they were safe, not knowing they were supposed to stop. And a major accident occurred because of it. Friends, truth has consequences. That's why Hosea, the minor prophet, said, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." If you don't have truth in your health, you'll wreck your health. If you don't have truth in your finances, you'll wreck your finances. If you don't have truth in a relationship, you'll wreck a relationship. Well, there's a second reason why truth matters. In fact, I'm going to ask everybody, close your eyes right where you're at. Close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, point the direction you think is north. Keep your eyes closed. You got to pick. Keep your hands pointed and keep them pointed and open up your eyes and look around. I think this section over here has somebody literally pointing every direction. No, I'm actually directionally challenged. I don't know what north is, but despite what some of you did, north is not straight up. Every single time I've done this, there's at least one person who points straight up where the direction of north is. Now, if you're trying to get up to where I live in Orange County, which is north, what might you have to help you know what is truth? Yeah, a compass or the app on your smartphone, right? Friends, truth is a compass for life. Not only does truth keep us from harm negatively, truth positively tells us what direction we should go. Truth acts like a compass. Now, my mom, God bless her, is a boomer, and she's come a long ways with technology. But years ago, she was setting up her own email account. And one of the first instructions that came up on the screen said, "Close all the windows." My mom, my own flesh and blood, got up from her chair, walked around the house, and literally closed all the windows in the house. Now, my sister was in high school, so she came back and explained what she was doing, and my sister, I think, cried and laughed for an hour and fell on the floor. Now, you're chuckling because you get the joke, right? You know that a computer or an iPad is designed by somebody very smart to function a certain way. There's a purpose and a truth built into it. And when we have the wrong information, what happens? Confusion, embarrassment, and anger. You see, truth actually brings us freedom. I think one of the biggest lies that all of us are tempted to face today, in a particular your generation, is about freedom. That freedom is doing whatever you want. If it feels good, and if you decide it, and you choose it, you're free. Friends, that's not freedom. That's slavery. There is no freedom apart from truth. G.K. Chesterton said, you can free a tiger from a zoo, but don't free a tiger from its stripes. Having stripes is in part what it means to be a tiger. You can free a camel from the zoo, but don't free it from its hump. You have to understand what something is and what is true about it. And then we know how it should live, how it should operate. That's why, quite amazingly, the first thing we learn about God in the Bible is not that God is holy, not that God is just, not that God is love, but in the beginning, God created. The first thing we're explicitly told about the character of God is that God is a creator. You know what that means? That means you're not an accident. Just like a computer, God built truth and purpose into the universe. And it's when we know that truth and use it according to the mind of the designer that we're actually set free. That's in part why Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Friends, number one, truth keeps us from harm, but number two, truth acts like a compass in life. But number three, truth matters because believing is not enough. You say, what do you mean? Look, nothing is true just because you believe it. Don't believe me? Do you know how many times I believed I was 6'9" and in the NBA? I'm only 6'7" on this stage. Friends, it doesn't matter how much I believe I'm a certain height, how much I believe I have certain money. Beliefs don't change things. In fact, reality is disgustingly indifferent to what we believe about it. Nothing is true just because you believe it. But given what's at stake in this life and for eternity, isn't it important that we know truth? Now, my guess is so far you agree with me, but you're also probably thinking, you haven't even defined truth for me. And you're right, I haven't. I'm going to give you a simple definition. I want you to write this down because this will serve you well when you have clarity on this. It's called the correspondence theory of truth. A statement is true when it matches up with or corresponds with reality. In other words, you make a statement or you hold a belief and you have an idea. And if it describes the world the way the world really is, then your beliefs are what? True. If it doesn't, your beliefs are what? False. So if I told you I drove here, I live in a town called San Juan Capistrano, and it only took me 36 minutes because I drove here in my new red Lamborghini. And you go walking outside and you see this, my statement just might be what? True. Just humor me, it might be true. Now, if you walk outside and you see this, my statement would be what? False. Why? Because I described it as red, in reality it's yellow. If you walk outside and see the kind of car I used to drive, which is this, I don't know why you're laughing. I gave this talk to a group of junior hires, and the kid goes, ah, ha, ha, you drive a Ford. I was like, what do you drive? My statement would be really false because it doesn't match up with reality. Now, in my family, we kind of like superheroes, so I use superheroes to teach my kids some basic life lessons. Think about truth this way. You have the object, Wolverine, Batman, and Spider-Man, and you have the word. When you have a correspondence, that's Wolverine, that's Batman, and that's Spider-Man. When the object corresponds with reality, then your beliefs are what? True. That's all we... Is that smoke? No, I'm just kidding. What'd you do when I said that? You turned around and you looked. Since there's no smoke back there, I realize in California this is never maybe the best example to use. I understand that, but born and raised here so I can get away with it. Actually, I was born in Texas, but age 4 all the way up in California. Since there's no smoke back there, my statement was false. If there were, my statement would be true. You see how this works? We describe the world, we hold beliefs, and we see if the world is the way we've taken it to be. If so, our beliefs are true. If not, they're false. Now, so far, you might be sitting there thinking, you know what? I'm not sure I know the fancy term correspondence theory of truth, but this actually seems pretty obvious. And you know what? It should. Everybody uses truth the way we just described it. It's inescapable. The Bible uses it. Now, the Bible doesn't define truth, but what's the 8th commandment? I'm messing with you. 8th commandment is don't steal. What's the 9th commandment? Don't lie. That's 10. Good try. What's a lie? A false statement is not a lie. A false statement, a lie is an intentional false statement. You can only have a false statement if you first have what? Truth. So you can't turn to a passage in the Bible where the Bible defines truth. But the Bible assumes that there's such a thing as truth that we can know, and tells us quite literally everything is at stake with what we believe about truth. Now, let's break this down a little bit, because pretty much everybody will agree with me on what we've talked about so far. But as soon as the topic shifts to moral values or religion, people will change what they mean by truth. So, for example, I'm curious, just shout it out. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Vanilla, chocolate? Okay, can we do better than vanilla and chocolate? Mint chip, Rocky Road, okay. Sherbet, sorry, not an ice cream. All right, I heard a lot of good answers, and I can also tell we're getting close to lunch. Let me save you some time and inform you of what the best flavor of ice cream is. Friends, the best flavor of ice cream is chocolate peanut butter. Now, by show of hands, who says that is true? Let me see your hands. Who says that is false? Okay, wait a minute. So you're telling me the statement, chocolate peanut butter ice cream is the best, can be true for me, but not true for many of you? The answer is, because we're talking about something we call subjective. Subjective claims are personal and they're private, and they actually depend upon what the individual believes. In fact, somebody tell me, what's the key word within subjective? Subject, exactly. A subjective claim is like a preference. When you think of subjective claims, I want you to think of ice cream flavor, because all of you may have a favorite flavor, and it's subjective, and it depends upon what you like or you don't like. That's what we mean by subjective. Now, what if I were to say chocolate peanut butter ice cream controls diabetes? Now, that's a very different statement, isn't it? That's not a claim of preference. That's a claim that if you get it wrong, there could be some serious consequences. This is what we call an objective claim. You see, subjective claims are internal to the mind. Objective claims are external, and they deal with the world in the way the world actually is. So if the key word in subjective is subject, what's the key word in objective? Object, good. So one is about the subject's perspective. The other one is about the object itself. So maybe think about it this way. If I had a big scoop of ice cream here, and I said, this ice cream is delicious, is it really about the object, the ice cream, or is it about my experience of the ice cream? That's right, it's more about my experience. If I said this weighs 24 grams, is that about my experience or about the ice cream? That's about the object, the ice cream itself. So when you think of subjective claims, I want you to think of ice cream. When you think of objective claims, I want you to think of insulin, because insulin actually helps control diabetes. Now, I'm going to ask all of you, you're a lively crowd, which I appreciate, to participate here with me, because I'm going to put on the screen some various statements. And I want you to shout out one of two things. If is it a subjective claim, I want you to shout out ice cream. If it's an objective claim, I want you to shout out insulin. Now, one thing before we start. I'm not asking if these claims are true or false. I'm simply asking what kind of claim is it, all right? Objective claim, shout out. Insulin, subjective claim, shout out. All right, you got it. Here we go. Coke tastes better than Pepsi. Okay, ice cream. Okay, good. Now, even if you don't like Coke or Pepsi, you know this is a preference type claim. All right, let's try another one. Diet Coke has fewer calories than regular Coke. Okay, insulin. Now, what are we talking about? The soda itself, the object, and a property that it allegedly has. Okay, good. How about this one? 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, good. I don't think I've had a single person shout out ice cream for math, although they're trying to change it in our great state, aren't they? You're right, though. Math deals with a mind-independent, objective world. All right, how about this one? Hawaii is the most beautiful vacation spot on earth. Okay, good. We all know it's San Juan Capistrano. By the way, I'm just going to throw this out there for you. If I put up on the screen, a rose is beautiful, that is not ice cream, that is insulin. If you don't think a rose is beautiful, you're just as wrong as if you don't think 2 + 2 = 4. And I'm dead serious, but I digress. All right, ice cream or insulin? George Washington was the first president of the United States. Okay, insulin, good. Now, what discipline does this deal with? This is history. So you can't see George Washington like you could allegedly see smoke coming up in the back, but we know there's a mind-independent truth about events in the past, and it's not just about our feelings. All right, so good. All right, how about this one? Ice cream or insulin? Action movies are more enjoyable than romances. Okay, good. Now, I know some of you guys are like, yeah, let me tell you something. 23 years of marriage here, don't die on that hill. All right, ice cream or insulin? Sean McDowell can bench press 300 pounds. Who says ice cream? Who says insulin? And I am not feeling the love. All right, now listen very carefully. I'm not asking if this is true or false. I'm asking, what kind of claim is this? To know if it's ice cream or insulin, do you need to know if that's true or false? No, you don't. There is a mind-independent fact about that claim, even though you don't know if it's true or false. Don't confuse knowing if something is true or false with something being objective or subjective. So if I said there's 50 quadrillion, zillion atoms in the universe, either that's true or false because that's about the object, the universe, even though we will never know if it's true or false. All right? Now on this one, you're like, yeah, but can you do it? Here's the deal. I used to care until I turned 40. Now I just want to stay alive. All right, ice cream or insulin? Earth is the center of the solar system. Okay, now I heard a little mix on this one. Is this a historical claim? Is that a mathematical claim? What kind of claim is it? Okay, it's scientific claim. Now, are scientific claims matter of preference, or do they deal with the objective real world? They deal with the real world. Now you're confused because this claim is also what? It's false. Friends, you can have a false objective claim. If I said George Washington was the second president of the United States, that's still about George Washington and about the presidency. It's just false. If I said 2 + 2 = 5, that's about the objective world. It's just false. So you can have a false objective claim. Now, I want everybody to vote on this one. Ice cream or insulin? So far, you've told me historical claims are like ice cream. Like insulin. Mathematical claims are like insulin. Scientific claims are about insulin. How about this one? Abortion is wrong. Who says ice cream? Let me see your hands. Who says insulin? Who says after the 2020 election, I will never vote again? I'm just kidding. Now, I want you to listen very carefully. Shh. That is not a scientific claim. That is not a historical claim. That is a moral claim. Here's the question, and please hear me. Are moral claims all like ice cream that are matters of preference? Or are moral claims like insulin that deal with an objective, real world? I was having a conversation years ago with a fellow about the topic of abortion. He said, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. I said, sorry to point out the obvious, but I can't. I actually think sarcasm is a spiritual gift. It's the 6th love language. Notice what he did. If you don't like abortion, don't have one. He shifted the category of abortion to a matter of preference. So I responded to him, prompted by one of my mentors. I said, I got a question for you. Are you against slavery? He said, of course, and looked at me like I'm stupid. I said, then if you don't like slavery, don't own a slave. Friends, are you against slavery because you don't like it? Or are we against slavery because it's objectively wrong to own and mistreat someone based on something secondary like skin color? If all morality is like ice cream, you have no basis for judging anything Hamas has done in Israel as being wrong if morality is like ice cream. Beheading children, and sorry to be honest, but this is some of the worst stuff I've seen in my entire life. Killing families, what they've done to women is unconscionable. If morality is like ice cream, you have no basis for judging anything these terrorists did as being wrong. But friends, I've had people tell me there's no right and wrong. When they tell me that, I never believe them. You know why? Number one, Romans 2 says, even people without the law know the law because it's written where? On their hearts. Everybody made in God's image knows they're right and they know there's wrong. In fact, my dad said to me one time, he said, you know what someone believes about morality? Not by what they say, not by what they do, but by how they want to be treated. Friends, people break a promise to you, but the moment you break a promise to them, they will cry foul. I teach at Biola University full-time, but I still teach one high school Bible class, and I tell my students, I say, if someone tells you there's no such thing as right and wrong, cut in front of them in line. What are they going to say? Hey, that's not right, that's not fair, as if there's some objective standard of rightness and fairness and justice that we're all supposed to follow. If morality is like ice cream, justice and fairness is an illusion. It doesn't exist. What is the question of abortion, by the way? Look. Think about it this way. Imagine you go home this afternoon and you decide to do the dishes. Now, for some of you, this is going to take a lot of imagination. You walk into home, your back is turned, you're doing the dishes, and maybe your younger brother or sister goes, hey, bro, hey, sis, can I kill this? Before you say yes or no, what question would you ask? What is it? If you turn around, it's a cockroach, you'd be like, yes. If you turn around, it's a little puppy, you'd be like, no, that's messed up. If you turn around, they say, hey, I pulled this infant out of a carriage down the street. Can I kill this? You'd be like, no. And even though you're 5, you need serious counseling. Friends, think about it. How we treat something depends upon what it is. If the unborn is not human, then no justification for abortion is necessary. If the unborn is human, then what justification is adequate to take the life of an innocent human being? That's why the Nazis, thank you. That's why the Nazis and Hamas have to dehumanize the Jews. Then they treat them according to that false, insidious philosophy. Friends, everybody knows there's right and wrong. We all know it. In fact, a number of years ago, when I was teaching high school full time, I had 3 students come into me and they said, Mr. McDowell, we just went to the public school across town and they had a meeting of this free thinking club and 100 students showed up to hear about atheism. What do you want to do about it? Well, we came up with the idea that 3 of my students would challenge 3 of these atheist students to a public debate in our church about the historical Jesus, evolution, intelligent design, and right and wrong, and they accepted. Our church was packed. It was awesome. Well, I prepped one of my students, and she got up there and she said, we know there's right and wrong. We expect people to keep their promises. There's a moral law, and the best explanation is there's a moral law giver. Right and wrong points to God. One of their students got up there who described himself as agnostic. He said there's no right and wrong, there's no moral law. It's all a matter of opinion. In fact, morality is a little bit like ice cream. You have your code and you follow it, but you really can't judge anybody else for how they live, and he sits down. Therefore, since morality is subjective, there's no need for God. About 10 minutes later, it's time for the closing speeches. And the same student who just said, there's no moral law, it's all opinion, walks up to the podium in my church and notices a primarily Christian audience. He goes, you know what? You guys are a bunch of bigots. You're hateful, you're homophobic, you're intolerant. Shame on you. Repeats himself 3 times and he sits down. Do you notice the contradiction? I don't know how he keeps those 2 things in his head without his head exploding. But the reality is, his worldview says there's no right and wrong. But even though he rejects God, he still lives in the world that God has made. And he's still made in the image of God. Friends, we know there's right and we know there's wrong. Morality is like insulin, not like ice cream. I'm gonna test you on 3 more of this. Ready? Ice cream or insulin? Jesus was a carpenter. Insulin. Jesus died on the cross in AD 30. Now, some argue 29, some argue 33, but that's still an insulin claim. How about this one? Jesus resurrected as proof he is divine. Now, I heard a little ice cream, I heard a little insulin. This is a historical claim about the religion with theological implications, isn't it? Is Jesus really God? Is he just God for you because that's what you believe? Or is he actually God of the universe? Friends, let me make it really clear so we're on the same page. Nobody dies and goes to hell just for not believing in Jesus. You know that, right? Nobody dies and goes to hell just for not believing in Jesus. People die and spend eternity separated from their Creator because of a moral rebellion against their Creator, because of a moral virus we call sin. And to say that Buddha or Krishna or Muhammad or any other religious figure can forgive my sins is like saying chocolate peanut butter ice cream controls diabetes. It doesn't work in the objective, real world. Does it ever just bother you that Jesus is the only way? I mean, the biggest virtues people hold up today are like diversity and inclusiveness. And Jesus is like, yep, I'm the only way. Seems a little exclusive. Why is Jesus the only way? Are you ready? Please hear me. Jesus is the only way to God because Jesus is the only one that fixed the problem that separates us from God. Friends, the problem is sin, and Jesus paid the debt that you and I cannot pay ourselves and offers us salvation as a free gift if we're humble enough to accept it. Friends, if your car runs out of gas, you got to identify the problem. It doesn't do any good to rotate the tires, get new spark plugs, plug in an EV and give it electricity. Doesn't do any good to drop $5,000 and get a new transmission. If your car's out of gas, you got to identify the problem and you got to fix it. There is an objective moral law rooted in God's character. And the problem is sin. That separates us from a holy God. Jesus is the only one who paid that debt. He's the only way to God because he's the only one who fixed the problem that separates us from God. You know, what's amazing about Christianity is that it's not the kind of system that can be true for you, but not true for you. Jesus said, if Christ has not been raised, your faith is worthless. You are still in your sins. You realize if I had the skull of Jesus in my backpack, number one, I'd be rich. Number two, your faith, says Paul, would be worthless. You're still in the sins and you're a liar and you should be pitied. Christianity, the entire system is based upon a single, testable, historical event. But if you're there with the women at the empty tomb, you could have actually ducked your head, reached inside, smelled the scent of a musty tomb, and seen the linen cloth of Jesus laying there. If you're there at the cross with John, you could have reached out and seen the cross and touched it and got a splinter on your hand and felt the trickle of warm blood coming down. If you're there with Thomas, who says, I will not believe unless I can see with my eyes and touch with my hands, you could have reached out and touched the spear wounds in the side of Jesus and the nail marks in his palm. Friends, either Christianity is true or it's false. Either you believe it or you don't. Christianity is not the kind of system that can be true for you, but not true for me. Do you see why it's so foolish for people to say, live your truth? That statement acts as if you have your own truth. Friends, you can live your beliefs, but you cannot live your truth. You can live your beliefs, but you cannot live your truth. The question is, do your beliefs match up with what is actually true? Now, what I haven't done in this talk is walk through how we know the evidence points towards Christianity. And in this room, you have two brilliant scholars over here on my left who've done some of the best work on the historical Jesus. You can pick up their books. Dr. Jeremiah's recent book on the resurrection is incredible, laying out 7 proofs that Jesus really rose from the grave. Dr. Evans has a ton on the historical Jesus. Friends, the facts are on our side. Christianity is actually true. We have nothing to be afraid of by challenges to the faith. But we've got to dig deep, love God with our minds, and be ready with an answer. Amen? Hey, let me pray for you, and then we're going to break for lunch. Father, thanks for such an amazing conference today. Thank you that we can learn so much just about you and your word and your plans for us and your direction. And I pray that you give every one of us in this room clarity on truth and courage and conviction to live it out. And God, break our hearts for those who do not believe truth. And be with our friends in Israel in light of what they're having to go through right now. We pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Sean McDowell.